From cheap and cartoonish designs to art pieces worth millions, in this video, we're looking at WWE Championship Belts starting at $1 and going all the way up to $10 million. Kicking things off at the bottom of the barrel with these cardboard championships that Heavy Machinery won back in 2019 that literally cost $1. However, this wasn't the only weird and cost-efficient championship belt from that era. During the same time, Daniel Bryan introduced the eco-friendly championship that barely cost $1,000 to make, and WWE sold replicas of this belt for $399 each. But honestly, you can just make one of these at home for around $10. The Divas Championship belt is another example of a belt that stayed cheap because the company let it stay cheap. The butterfly design never got real gold plating the way men's titles did, and its replicas today sell for as little as $40 to $100, with the original costing around $5,000 to $10,000. Right around that same range sits the NWA Georgia Heavyweight Championship, a regional title defended mostly on local Atlanta television throughout the 60s and 70s by names like El Mongol. It had a simple gold plate construction, minimal fame outside the Southeast, landing a realistic estimate around $8,000 to $15,000 today. Above this sits the NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship out of Florida, the title Jack Briscoe carried before he became a two-time NWA World Champion. Florida's promotion had national reach through Gordon Solie's syndicated broadcasts, and Briscoe's own legacy pushes this title's cost closer to $15,000 to $25,000. Right alongside it is Memphis's Southern Heavyweight Championship, the belt Jerry Lawler built his entire career around. Memphis wrestling had one of the widest footprints of any territory in the country, and Lawler became one of the most recognizable stars in wrestling history, putting the price of this belt in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. But moving on from these Level 1 belts, up next, the numbers start to rise as we head into Level 2. Before WWE or WCW ruled the wrestling world, the AWA was one of the biggest promotions in the country, and its World Heavyweight Championship carried real weight both on-screen and off. When an original AWA title hit the auction block in 2013, it sold for $35,000. Not bad for a promotion that's been out of business since the early 90s, and proof that even belts from companies that don't exist anymore still hold serious value with collectors who know their history. Then there's Stone Cold Steve Austin's Smoking Skull belt, the custom WWE Championship covered in skulls and flames that basically became a walking symbol of the Attitude Era. Estimates on original Smoking Skull belts start north of $50,000, and honestly, that feels almost cheap for a title this connected to one of wrestling's biggest stars ever. In fact, this belt is in the same ballpark price range as the original AEW World Championship. When AEW launched in 2019, they went straight to legendary belt maker Dave Millican to build their world championship from scratch. Years later, Millican went on Chris Jericho's podcast and talked about the numbers. He said he couldn't remember the exact figure, but confirmed it was 5 figures, over $40,000, once you accounted for the layers, the custom artwork, the individually set stones, and the rusted-looking finish that gives the belt its unique look. The WWE Intercontinental Championship sits in the same price range with decades of prestige and legacy behind it. The US title sits slightly lower with an estimated price of around $40,000, putting it at almost the same price as the AEW World Championship. The Universal titles on Raw and SmackDown from 2016 to 2021 cost around $85,000, making its price twice that of the AEW World title. But while these title belts look glamorous, Paul Heyman's ECW World Heavyweight Championship wasn't meant to look glamorous, it was meant to look dangerous. Back in the mid-90s, the Philadelphia-based promotion had a cult following thanks to its wild matches and segments, and its world title belt captured the same vibe. It had no gemstones, no extra shine, it was simply a battered-looking plate that matched a promotion built on barbed wire and folding chairs. Tommy Dreamer, Taz, and Rob Van Dam all carried it through some of the most brutal matches in wrestling history, and original versions of that belt now sell for around $75,000. Right in that same range sits a belt from a completely different world of wrestling. TNA's World Heavyweight Championship, introduced in 2007 and carried by names like AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, and Kurt Angle during the company's biggest years, is valued today at roughly $75,000 as well. TNA never came close to touching WWE or WCW in size, but the belt that defined its golden era still holds real weight with collectors. The NWA World Heavyweight Championship sits right above both of them, and this one goes back to 1973, built by a jeweler in Mexico. Ric Flair held this thing 8 separate times and carried it across the world for over 2 years straight during the mid-80s, nicknaming it Sweet Charlotte. Vintage NWA belts from that era, especially ones tied to Flair or Harley Race, go for $100,000 or more at auction now. But while every belt so far has come out of North America, up next, we have a title belt that comes from a completely different corner of the world. New Japan Pro Wrestling's IWGP Heavyweight Championship, introduced in 1987 with Antonio Inoki as the first champion, was built around thick gold plates and engraved lions representing their philosophy of treating wrestling as a legit sport rather than pure spectacle. Kazuchika Okada, Hiroshi Tanahashi, and Shinsuke Nakamura all built entire legendary runs around this design, and today it's valued at more than $190,000, putting it ahead of the NWA World title and firmly in the same tier as some of WWE's most decorated belts, despite New Japan never operating anywhere near WWE's budget or reach. In fact, the WWE Undisputed title belt from the early 2000s cost around $150,000, making it one of the most expensive belts in Level 2. That's 4 completely different companies, 4 completely different design philosophies, and all 4 landed in roughly the same price range. But going from Level 2 to Level 3, here's where the numbers stop making sense, because the same belt can have 2 wildly different price tags depending on who's telling the story. John Cena's spinning logo title from 2005 divided fans for years. Some fans loved it, while others laughed at its design. Some estimates value it at just $85,000 based on its materials and mechanics. But when an actual spinner belt went to auction, it sold for $300,000. Same design fans called cheap and gaudy for over a decade, and it still tripled its own estimate the moment collectors started bidding. The Winged Eagle Championship tells an even wilder version of this story. Worn by Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart, and Shawn Michaels through wrestling's golden and new generation eras, most estimates put its value around $150,000. However, this belt was actually sold at auction for $400,000. And then there's the $1 Million Championship, and this one has more than one myth attached to it. For years, the belt's exact price was treated like a company secret. Bruce Pritchard, who worked directly with the $1 Million Man himself, eventually confirmed on a podcast that the belt cost close to $50,000 to build, and that the diamonds set into the leather on the back were real. That directly contradicts Ted's own retelling years later, where he claimed the stones were always just cubic zirconia. Pritchard also told a story about the time he and Ted left the belt sitting in a car outside a restaurant in Hartford, Connecticut, only to come back and find the car had been broken into. The belt, somehow, was still there. On the collector market today, that same title has been valued anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000, meaning, depending on which era of the story you believe, this belt either kept its real diamonds after surviving a break-in or spent decades being a $50,000 lie that's now worth almost 10 times what it cost to build. But if you thought that was crazy, back in 2012, the big gold title belt, which was held by legends like Sting, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan in WCW, and later names like Triple H, Batista, and John Cena in WWE, which cost around $40,000 to make, sold for $500,000 at an auction. And while $500,000 might be reasonable for a belt with a legacy that rich, the record for the most expensive WWE title belt ever sold doesn't even belong to a world title. It belongs to the Andre the Giant Memorial Championship, created after Andre's passing as a tribute to the man known as the Eighth Wonder of the World. Covered in gold, silver, and jewels, this belt was never about in-ring competition. It existed purely as a memorial, and when one hit the auction block, it sold for $600,000, the highest confirmed real auction price of any WWE belt in history. Not the undisputed title, not the big gold belt, not any belt tied to a decades-long championship lineage. A tribute belt built to honor one man beat every single one of them. Andre stood over 7 feet tall and weighed more than 500 pounds in his prime, and even in death, his belt is still outweighing the competition. And if you're wondering why these belts cost so much, the answer is simple. The wrestling fan base consists of super passionate fans, and when we're buying wrestling belts, it's not just about some leather and jewels, it's about the pride, passion, and memories that come with them. But while we're talking about belts, we gotta talk about the GOAT, Dave Millican. When it comes to championship belts in wrestling, Dave Millican has been the undisputed king, designing belts for WWE, AEW, and even New Japan Pro Wrestling for 20-plus years. In fact, he made his first title belt at just 13 years old out of cardboard and cheap tin in his childhood bedroom. From there, Millican never stopped, and some of the most recognized title belts you've seen on TV growing up as a kid were all his creations. An authentic WWE title belt that you see on TV costs anywhere from $20,000 to over $50,000 to make. But from the $1 cardboard belts to the $50,000 AEW World title, from New Japan's beautiful title to belts being auctioned for $500,000, up next, it's time to reveal the most expensive title belt in WWE history, the Crown Jewel Championship. Triple H announced before the belts even debuted that they carried at least 50 carats of diamonds each. When Cody Rhodes beat Gunther and Liv Morgan beat Nia Jax at Crown Jewel 2024 to become the first ever champions, WWE revealed the real number. Cody's belt had 3,356 embedded stones. Liv Morgan's had 3,273. The cost of the Crown Jewel Championship sits at around $10 million, making it by far the most expensive championship belt in wrestling history. But here's the part that makes it even stranger. Neither champion got to keep their belt. Instead of the belts, Cody and Liv Morgan each walked away with a ring. Both titles stayed in Riyadh, on permanent display at the WWE Experience. However, title belts aren't the only expensive things in WWE. Many wrestlers spend well over six figures on cars, watches, and weird things that only rich people can afford. And if you want to find out how WWE wrestlers spend their millions, check out this video next.